Hi, and welcome to the talk Error Economics, or How to Avoid Breaking the Budget. In this talk, we're going to explore error budgets and how to use them to add pass-fail criteria to our CI pipelines. Because as SREs, one of our main goals is to reduce manual labor, or toil, to a minimum, while at the same time keeping the systems we manage as reliable and available as possible. To be able to do this in a safe manner, it's really important that we're able to easily inspect the state of the system we're operating. To measure whether we're successful in this endeavor, we establish service level agreements, service level indicators, and service level objectives. Traditional monitoring is really helpful in doing this, but it won't allow us to react until the issue is already present, likely already affecting users in production. To be able to take action proactively, we may use something like a load testing tool or reliability testing tool to simulate load in our system, measuring how it behaves under real-world circumstances before we release anything to production. While we'll never be able to compensate fully for the fact that we're not running in production, we can still simulate production-like load, possibly even while injecting real-world turbulence into the system, giving us a pretty good picture of what we can expect in production as well. When we start out creating these service-level artifacts, it's usually tempting to over-engineer them, trying to take every edge case into account. My recommendation would be that you try to avoid this to the extent possible. Instead, aim for a simple set of indicators and objectives that are generic enough so that you may use them for multiple systems. You may then expand on them and make them more specific as your understanding of the systems you manage increase over time. Doing this is likely to save you a lot of time, as we otherwise tend to come up with unrealistic or irrelevant measurements or requirements, mainly due to our own lack of experience. So let's talk a bit about service level indicators and service level objectives. Service level indicators are quantitative measures of a system's health. To make it easy to remember, we may think of it as what we are measuring. If we, for instance, try to come up with some SLI for a typical web application, we are likely to end up with things like request duration, uptime, and error rate. What should be included in these SLIs? In most cases, we only want to include valid requests. A good formula to follow when crafting SLIs is available in the Google SRE docs, and they state that an SLI equals the amount of good events divided by the amount of valid events times 100 expressed as percentages. As an example, if a user sends us a request that is not within the defined constraints of our service, then we of course need to handle that gracefully, letting the user know that the request is unsupported. However, we shouldn't really be measured by whether we're able to process these requests or not, because that was never the plan to begin with. Service level objectives, on the other hand, are the targets we set for our SLIs. Think of it as what the measures should show to be okay. For instance, if our SLI is based on request duration and shows how many percent of all requests are below 500 ms, our SLO would express how big a percentage we expect to be below 500 ms for our service to be considered to be within the limit. And now that we know what SLIs and SLOs are, what is an error budget? An error budget is the remainder of the SLI once the SLO has been applied. For instance, if our SLO is 99.9%, that would mean that our error budget is the remaining 0.1% up to 100. To not breach our SLOs, we then need to be able to fit all events that would not adhere to the criteria we set up into that 0.1%. This includes outages, service degradations, and even planned maintenance windows. What I'm trying to say here is that going for 4 nines or even 3 nines as your SLO has astronomical impact on the amount of engineering effort needed. For a downtime or unavailability SLI, a 3-9 SLO basically means that you can afford as little as 1 minute and 26 seconds of downtime daily, or 8 hours, 45 minutes and 56 seconds of downtime over an entire year. In my experience, very few systems are critical enough to motivate this level of availability. With an SLO like this, even with rolling restarts and zero downtime deployments, we can't really afford to make that many mistakes at all. And given these tight constraints or this tight budget, when would it be acceptable to burn the budget on purpose? I like to use the following sentence as some kind of rule of thumb. It is only acceptable to burn error budget on purpose if the goal of the activity causing the burn is to reduce the burn rate going forward. Okay, so let's do some examples. We'll be testing an online food service called Hipster Pizza. As service level indicators, we'll be using the response time of requests and the HTTP response status success rate. What would then be reasonable SLOs for these SLIs? First, we gotta ask ourselves if we already have commitments to our customers or users in the form of SLAs. If we do, we at the very least need to stay within that. However, it's also good to agree on our internal ambitions, and usually these ambitions turn out to be far less forgiving than whatever we dare to promise our users. In this example, we'll use the following SLOs. 95% of all valid requests will have a response time below 300 ms. And 99.9% of all valid requests will reply with a successful HTTP response status. This means that the error budget for response time is 5%, while the error budget for HTTP success is 0.1%. Now, to really know whether we are able to stay within this budget, we need to measure this in production, and we also need to assign a time window to our SLOs. For instance, that the SLO is measured on a month-to-month basis or a sliding 7-day window. We also need to test this somehow continuously to make sure whether a certain change introduces regression, suddenly preventing us from hitting our target. This is where K6 or reliability testing tools in general come in. Most of the time, we only speak about monitoring our SLOs. I would like to propose that we take this one step further. With the traditional approach of monitoring, we're not really equipped to react prior to consuming the budget, especially with the extremely tight budgets we had a look at earlier. Instead, we're only going to be alerted once we're already approaching SLO game over. Don't get me wrong here, I still believe we need and should monitor our production SLOs. But we should also complement this with some kind of indicative testing, allowing us to take action before the budget breach has occurred, possibly even stopping the release altogether until the issue has been resolved. By running a test that simulates the traffic and behavior of users in production, we're able to extrapolate the effect the change would have over time, and use that as an indicator of how the change would affect production SLOs. But there's also one other thing we need to take into account, and that's scheduled downtime or maintenance windows. In a real-world production system, these likely occur all the time. In some cases, this is possible without requiring any downtime whatsoever, but for the vast majority, some downtime every now and then is unavoidable, even with rolling restarts, canaries, feature flags, and red-green deployments in place. We should put some time into identifying what activities we do that actually require downtime, and account for that in our test. If our SLOs are measured on a month-to-month basis, and we usually have 10 minutes of downtime every workday, we also need to deduct a corresponding amount from our error budget. For a month with 31 days, 22 of them being workdays, 10 minutes of downtime every workday would mean we have a planned downtime of 220 minutes per 744 hours, or expressed as percentages, 0.0049%. We now need to adjust our SLOs and SLIs that we use in our test accordingly, prior to calculating the error budget. Heavily simplified, not taking usage volume spread and such into account. This would in our case mean the actual error budgets for our test would be 0.0951% and 4.9951%. So by using these calculated error budgets, we may then express them as thresholds in our test and use them as pass-fail criteria for whether our build was successful or not. And once we have those in our CI workflow, we'll also be able to increase our confidence in product iterations not breaking the error budget. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the talk. If you have any questions or want to continue the discussion around SLOs, SLIs, and error budgets, feel free to hit me up at Twitter, where I'm 0x12b, or via email, where I'm simma@k6.io. Enjoy the rest of SLOconf. Thanks.